I have heard hundreds of people swear they did not cause an accident. Some say the light was green, some say the road was wet, some say the other driver came out of nowhere. But there was one case, one ordinary family van, one quiet intersection, and one frightened little girl in the back seat that still returns to me when I sit alone after court. Because the question seemed simple: who hit the family van? But by the end of that trial, I understood something far darker. The crash was not the mystery. The mystery was why everyone around that van was lying. The case came before me on a cold Tuesday morning. At first glance, it looked like a standard civil and criminal traffic matter. A family van had been struck near the intersection of Cedar Street and Westbrook Avenue. The driver, a mother named Rachel Morgan, had been taking her 3 children home from a school event. Her husband, David Morgan, sat beside her. Their children were in the back: 12-year-old Chloe, 9-year-old Ethan, and 6-year-old Lily. The van was pushed sideways into a utility pole. Rachel suffered a fractured wrist. David had broken ribs. Ethan needed stitches above his eyebrow. Chloe escaped with bruises, but Lily did not speak for 3 days after the crash. That detail was buried deep inside the medical report, written in a sentence so flat it almost disappeared. Minor patient presented with acute stress response and temporary mutism. Temporary mutism, that is how court documents speak about terror when they want to sound professional. But when I first saw Lily Morgan sitting beside her mother in my courtroom, holding a stuffed rabbit against her chest, I knew there was nothing minor about what that child had witnessed. She did not look at the defendant. She did not look at me. She looked at the floor. And every time someone said the word van, her fingers tightened around that rabbit's ear. The man accused of hitting the family van was named Kevin Brooks. He was 38 years old, a local contractor, clean shirt, trimmed beard, and the practiced seriousness of a man who knew exactly how to appear responsible. He claimed he had not hit anyone. According to him, he was driving behind the Morgan family when a dark pickup truck came speeding through the intersection, struck the van, and disappeared into the rain. A hit and run. That was his story. And at first, it seemed possible the crash happened during a storm. Visibility was poor. Traffic cameras nearby were not working. Several witnesses gave conflicting descriptions. One person saw a black truck, another saw a silver SUV, another said all they remembered were headlights and the sound of metal tearing. Confusion is common after a crash, but confusion can also be useful to the person who caused it. Kevin Brooks sat at the defense table with his attorney, Mark Ellison. Mr. Ellison was polished, confident, and quick to remind the court that no one had actually seen Kevin's vehicle strike the van. He repeated that phrase several times. No one saw impact. No one saw impact. No one saw impact. That is a courtroom tactic. If you repeat a doubt often enough, you hope it becomes stronger than evidence. Assistant District Attorney Olivia Bennett represented the state. She was calm, sharp, and patient in a way that often made opposing counsel uncomfortable. She did not try to overpower Mr. Ellison. She simply listened. Good prosecutors know silence can be a trap. When she finally stood, she said, "Your Honor, this case is not only about who struck the van, it is about what happened in the 4 minutes before the crash." 4 minutes. I wrote that down because whenever a lawyer gives me a precise window of time, I know she has something. Mr. Ellison immediately objected, saying the state was trying to create a dramatic narrative because it lacked direct proof of impact. I overruled him. Barely 30 minutes into the hearing, I already noticed Kevin Brooks's behavior shifting. When the accident itself was discussed, he remained composed. When vehicle damage was discussed, he remained composed. But when Ms. Bennett said 4 minutes before the crash, his eyes moved not to his lawyer, not to the jury, to Rachel Morgan. That was the first moment I felt something move beneath the surface of the case. Rachel noticed it too. She lowered her head immediately, almost instinctively, like someone who had been trained not to hold eye contact with a certain kind of man. I have seen that movement before. Fear becomes habit when it is lived with someone long enough. Olivia Bennett called Rachel Morgan to the stand. Rachel walked slowly, her wrist still wrapped, her face pale. She looked exhausted, but not weak. There is a kind of strength in people who have been pushed to the edge and are still standing because their children are watching. She testified that she had attended a school music program that evening with her family. Afterward, they stopped briefly at a gas station. Then they drove home through heavy rain. Olivia asked whether Rachel noticed anything unusual before the crash. Rachel hesitated. Kevin Brooks leaned back slightly, not much, but enough. Rachel said, There was a vehicle behind us. What kind of vehicle? A dark SUV. Maybe black, maybe dark blue. It was raining. Was it close? Rachel swallowed. Too close. The courtroom became quiet. Olivia asked, "How long did it follow you?" Rachel looked down at her hands. "I don't know, a few minutes. My husband noticed it first. David Morgan, sitting in the gallery, shifted painfully against his injured ribs. Then Rachel said something that made me look directly at Kevin Brooks. My daughter Lily said she saw the driver. Mr. Ellison stood immediately. Objection, hearsay. I sustained the objection for that moment, but I did not forget it. Lily saw the driver. I looked at the child. She was still staring at the floor. Olivia moved carefully. She asked Rachel whether she knew Kevin Brooks before the crash. Rachel's jaw tightened. Yes. Kevin's face changed. Only for a second. But it changed. How did you know him? Olivia asked. Rachel took a breath. He did work on our house. What kind of work? Roof repairs, some basement work. When? About 6 months before the accident. And did anything happen between your family and Mr. Brooks before the crash? Mr. Ellison objected again. This time harder. He argued relevance, prejudice, character evidence. He said the state was trying to turn a traffic case into a personal dispute, but Rachel's eyes had already filled with tears. And Kevin Brooks, the man who claimed he was only an innocent driver behind a mysterious hit and run, was staring at her with a kind of warning that made even the court officer glance in his direction. I allowed limited questioning. Rachel said Kevin had overcharged them for repairs. David disputed the bill. There were arguments. Kevin showed up at their house twice demanding payment. The second time, he stood in the driveway while the children were inside and told David, "People who cheat me always regret it." That sentence landed in the courtroom like a dropped glass. Mr. Ellison tried to soften it immediately. He said contractors get frustrated. Customers refuse to pay. Words are said. That does not make someone responsible for a crash. And legally, he was right. Words alone do not prove a collision, but words can reveal motive. And motive is the shadow that tells you where to look when evidence is hiding. Then Olivia Bennett placed the first photograph on the evidence screen. It showed the Morgan family van after the crash. The passenger side was crushed inward. The rear panel was bent. The paint was scraped down to bare metal. Then she placed another photograph beside it, Kevin Brooks's SUV. It had damage on the front left bumper, fresh damage, dark red paint transfer, the same color as the Morgan family van. The jury leaned forward. Kevin did not move. Mr. Ellison said the damage came from a worksite accident 2 days earlier. He had repair shop notes, he said. He had an explanation, but Olivia was not looking at the bumper. She was looking at the windshield. She asked the courtroom technician to zoom in. There, stuck near the lower edge of Kevin's windshield, was a small torn piece of paper, a parking pass, from the school music program, Rachel Morgan's school music program. Olivia slowly toward Kevin Brooks. Mr. Brooks stated he was not at the school event, she said. The courtroom became silent. Kevin's attorney froze. Rachel covered her mouth, and little Lily Morgan finally lifted her head. For the first time that morning, the child looked across the courtroom, directly at Kevin Brooks, and whispered, "That's him." When Lily Morgan whispered, "That's him," the entire courtroom seemed to stop breathing. She was 6 years old, small hands, stuffed rabbit pressed against her chest, voice barely strong enough to cross the aisle, but somehow those 2 words reached every corner of that room. Kevin Brooks turned toward her. Not quickly, not dramatically. Just enough for me to see his eyes narrow, and that disturbed me because an innocent man falsely accused by a frightened child usually looks shocked, hurt, confused, maybe even desperate to explain himself. Kevin Brooks looked irritated, as if the child had broken a rule. Rachel Morgan immediately pulled Lily closer, whispering something I could not hear. David Morgan shifted forward in his seat, despite the pain in his ribs. The jury watched the little girl with a mixture of sympathy and uncertainty, and Mark Ellison, Kevin's attorney, stood at once. "Your Honor, I move to strike that statement. The child is not under oath, and this is highly prejudicial." He was right about the procedure. I instructed the jury to disregard the spontaneous statement for the moment, but let me tell you something honestly. Jurors are human. Judges are human. Court reporters are human. Once a child says, "That's him," while looking directly at the man accused of harming her family, the words do not simply vanish because a judge instructs the room to place them aside. They remain, quietly waiting. Olivia Bennett did not smile. Good prosecutors do not celebrate when a child is frightened. She simply stood still, as if she had expected the truth to surface, but not quite so early. Then she asked for a brief recess to determine whether Lily Morgan could be questioned in a limited and appropriate manner. Mark Ellison objected again, arguing that the state was using a traumatized child to patch holes in a weak case. That phrase bothered me. Using a traumatized child, sometimes defense attorneys say things that are legally strategic but morally dangerous. No one should exploit a child, but silencing a child because her truth is inconvenient is another kind of harm. I granted a short recess. During that break, I remained in chambers and reviewed the exhibits already entered. The van, the red paint transfer, Kevin's front bumper, the school parking pass on his windshield, the claim that he had not been at the school. The prior dispute over construction work, the threat in the driveway, the child's sudden identification. I have learned that cases rarely collapse all at once. They fracture. One small crack, then another, then another. And if you listen carefully, you can hear the structure beginning to fail before anyone else admits it. When we returned, Olivia Bennett informed the court that Lily's parents did not want her to testify unless absolutely necessary. I respected that. The courtroom is not kind to children, even when everyone tries to be gentle. Instead, Olivia called David Morgan. He walked to the stand slowly, one hand pressed against his ribs. Every step looked painful, yet when he took the oath, his voice was steady. David was a school maintenance supervisor. Quiet man, careful answers, the kind of witness lawyers sometimes underestimate because he does not perform for the jury. Olivia asked him about the contractor dispute. David explained that Kevin Brooks had been hired to repair storm damage to their roof and basement. At first, Kevin seemed friendly. He joked with the children, promised quick work, and told Rachel he treated every client like family. I wrote that phrase down, like family. People who use warmth too early often intend to ask for trust they have not earned. David said the work began well, then slowed. Materials disappeared. Bills changed. Kevin demanded extra cash for repairs David believed were already included in the contract. When David asked for receipts, Kevin became defensive. Did you pay him? Olivia asked. Most of it, David said. But I refused the final payment until he fixed the basement leak. How much was the final payment? $4,800. Kevin Brooks looked down, not at the table this time, at his hand. David continued. He said Kevin came to their house the first time angry but controlled. The second time he arrived after dark. Rachel was home with the children. David told him to leave. Kevin stood near the van in the driveway and said, "You people think because you have kids, nobody can touch you." That sentence changed the air. Rachel closed her eyes. The jury noticed. Olivia asked, "Did you report that?" David shook his head. "Why not?" he swallowed. "Because I thought it was just talk." That answer hurt more than he probably understood, because so many tragedies begin with people trying to convince themselves a threat was only talk. We do it because believing the alternative would force us to live differently. Lock the doors. Change routes, call police, protect children from a danger we are not ready to name. David said after the school music program, he noticed a dark SUV leaving the parking lot not long after them. He did not think much of it at first, but then the same headlights stayed behind them through 3 turns. "Did you recognize the vehicle?" Olivia asked. "I thought it looked like Kevin's SUV. "Did you tell your wife?" "Yes." "What did she do?" "She told me not to scare the kids." That detail was human. A mother driving through rain, trying not to show fear because her children were listening from the back seat. "David," said Lily, asked from the back, "is that the man from our house?" Kevin's attorney objected. I sustained it, but again the words had entered the room. "The man from our house." Olivia moved carefully. "Mr. Morgan." "What happened at Cedar and Westbrook?" David's face tightened. "We stopped at the red light. Then I heard Rachel say, 'He's too close.' I looked in the side mirror. Headlights came up fast, then impact." He paused, his breath caught. "I remember Lily screaming. No one moved. Even Mark Ellison let the silence sit for a moment before cross-examination. When he stood, he went after memory. Rain, pain, shock, darkness. He suggested David had assumed the SUV was Kevin's because of their prior dispute. He suggested anger can distort perception. He suggested the parking pass could have come from any vehicle parked near the school. David listened. Then Mark asked, "Mr. Morgan, you cannot personally testify that you saw Kevin Brooks's face behind the wheel at the moment of impact, can you?" David looked at him. "No." Mark's expression softened just slightly. Then David added, "But I saw his face before the crash." Mark stopped. Olivia looked up sharply. I leaned forward. David said that when they were stopped at the red light, the SUV came close enough for its headlights to fill the mirrors. In the passenger side mirror, for 1 second, through the rain and glare, he saw the driver leaning forward. "Who was it?" Olivia asked. David looked directly at Kevin. It was him. Kevin Brooks shook his head just once, a small, controlled denial, but his attorney looked irritated now, not confident. That mattered. Lawyers can prepare for evidence. They can prepare for testimony, but they cannot always prepare for a quiet witness who suddenly remembers the one detail that turns doubt into direction. Olivia then called Officer James Miller, the crash investigator. He testified that Kevin Brooks's vehicle had damage consistent with impact against the rear passenger side of the Morgan van. He also testified that Kevin's SUV was found at his workshop the next morning, partially covered by a tarp. A tarp. That word always interests me in vehicle cases. People cover cars for many reasons, weather, privacy, .stored. But when a vehicle involved in a disputed crash is covered before police inspect it, a judge begins asking why. Officer Miller said there were fresh sanding marks near the front bumper and a can of red automotive paint solvent found on the floor of the garage. Mark Ellison objected to speculation. Officer Miller did not speculate. He simply described what he saw. Olivia placed photographs on the screen, the bumper, the sanding marks, the paint solvent, the tarp. Kevin Brooks stared straight ahead, his jaw working beneath his beard. Then Olivia showed one more photograph. Inside Kevin's workshop, on a wooden shelf, was a child's purple hair clip. Rachel Morgan gasped. David turned toward her. Olivia asked, "Mrs. Morgan, do you recognize that item?" Rachel's voice broke. "It's Lily's." The courtroom went completely still. Mark Ellison stood immediately. Objection. No foundation. No chain of custody connecting that object to the crash. I allowed the objection in part, but I permitted limited questioning. Officer Miller explained the hair clip was recovered from a crack near the lower grille of Kevin's SUV. It had been logged as trace evidence before anyone knew it belonged to Lily. Kevin finally whispered something to his attorney. Mark leaned down. Whatever Kevin said made Mark's face harden. That was when I realized the defense had a problem bigger than the bumper. A school parking pass could be explained. Paint transfer could be challenged. Witness memory could be attacked. But a 6-year-old girl's hair clip lodged in the front of the defendant's vehicle was not easy to turn into coincidence. Olivia Bennett walked back to the evidence table. She lifted a small sealed bag. Inside was the purple hair clip. Lily saw it from her mother's arms. Her face changed instantly. Not curiosity, Mira. Her fingers released the stuffed rabbit for the first time all morning. She pointed at the evidence bag and whispered, "It fell when the window broke." Rachel held her tighter. I looked at Kevin Brooks, and for the first time since the trial began, I saw fear cross his face. Not guilt, not remorse. Fear. Because a child he thought would stay silent had just connected the evidence to the moment of impact. Then Olivia Bennett turned to the court and said, "Your Honor, there is one more witness." Mark Ellison frowned. "Who?" Olivia looked toward the back doors. The courtroom waited. A court officer opened them, and a teenage boy stepped inside, pale, nervous, and holding a phone in both hands. Kevin Brooks turned around. The moment he saw that boy, all the color left his face, because the teenager had recorded something in the school parking lot that no one else was supposed to see. The teenage boy who stepped into my courtroom looked like he wanted to disappear. His name was Tyler Dawson, 16 years old, student volunteer at the school music program. He walked slowly, holding his phone with both hands, shoulders pulled inward, eyes moving between the floor and Kevin Brooks, as if every step toward the witness stand made breathing harder. And Kevin Brooks watched him like a man watching a locked door open. That is something I have learned over the years. Defendants react differently to different kinds of evidence. Comes annoy them. Photographs worry them. Witnesses frighten them. But expected witnesses expose them. Because a person can prepare a lie for the facts they know are coming. But when someone walks in carrying a truth they never planned for, the mask has to adjust in real time. Kevin's mask was slipping. Mark Ellison stood immediately. Your Honor, we object to surprise testimony. This witness was not listed in the initial disclosure. Olivia Bennett did not argue emotionally. She simply stated that Tyler Dawson had come forward only the night before after seeing a local news report about the Morgan family crash. He had contacted police and turned over a video recorded in the school parking lot minutes before the collision. I looked at the boy. He was trembling, not performing, trembling. There is a difference between a teenager excited to be part of something dramatic and a teenager terrified that telling the truth might bring trouble to his own door. I allowed limited testimony. Tyler raised his right hand and swore to tell the truth. His voice cracked on the word truth. Olivia began gently. Tyler, why were you at the school that night? I was helping clean up after the music program. Did you know the Morgan family? He shook his head. Not really. I saw them around school events. Did you know Kevin Brooks? Tyler hesitated, then he said, I knew who he was. That answer caught my attention. People usually say yes or no. I knew who he was means reputation. It means the name carries weight before the person speaks. Olivia asked him to explain. Tyler said Kevin had done repair work at the school the year before. He was around the building for several weeks. Some of the students knew his SUV because he parked near the loading area and sometimes got angry when parents blocked his truck. He yelled a lot, Tyler said quietly. Kevin shifted in his chair. Not much enough. Olivia asked Tyler what happened after the music program ended. Tyler said he was outside near the side entrance recording a video for his friend. It was raining lightly, and he wanted to show how empty the parking lot looked after everyone left. While filming, he noticed a dark SUV parked near the back row with its lights off. What made you notice it? Olivia asked. Tyler looked toward Kevin, then quickly away. There was someone sitting inside. Could you see who? Not at first. Olivia asked what happened next. Tyler's fingers tightened around the phone. He said the Morgan family walked out toward their van. The mother was carrying programs, and one of the kids was skipping beside her. The little girl dropped something near the rear door. Rachel Morgan helped her pick it up. Then the dark SUV's headlights came on. Tyler said the vehicle did not move right away. It waited. That word mattered, waited. Not parked, not leaving, waited. The courtroom was quiet now. Even the gallery seemed afraid to breathe too loudly. Olivia asked Tyler if he continued recording. He nodded. Mark Ellison stood again, objecting to foundation and authenticity. I instructed Olivia to establish the chain carefully. She did. The original video was still on Tyler's phone. Metadata showed time and date. Police had downloaded a copy and verified it had not been edited. Then she asked permission to play it. I looked toward Rachel Morgan. Her arm was around Lily, who was resting against her side, the stuffed rabbit in her lap. David Morgan sat rigidly, his eyes fixed on the screen before the video even started. I allowed the video. The courtroom monitor flickered. Rain-speckled parking lot, school lights glowing yellow against the wet pavement, students and parents leaving in small groups. Then the camera moved slightly. Shaky in the way teenagers record without thinking about history being captured in their hands. The Morgan family appeared. Rachel opened the van's sliding door. David helped Ethan climb in. Chloe leaned into the back seat. Lily stood near the rear tire, holding her stuffed rabbit and looking over her shoulder. Then the camera panned toward the far end of the lot. A dark SUV sat under a tree. Lights off, engine faintly visible through exhaust in the cold air. A few seconds passed. Then the headlights came on. The SUV rolled forward slowly, not toward the exit, toward the Morgan van. Rachel's hand went to her mouth. David whispered something I could not hear. The video showed the SUV stopping behind a row of parked cars while the Morgan family pulled out. Then Tyler's teenage voice could be heard on the recording, speaking to someone off camera. Is that guy following them? The courtroom went still. On the screen, the Morgan van exited the parking lot. 4 seconds later, Kevin's SUV followed. Mark Ellison leaned forward, staring at the monitor, as if he could force the image to change by looking hard enough. Olivia paused the video and zoomed in. The driver's side window of the SUV caught the light from the school entrance. For one frame, maybe two, the driver's face became visible. Kevin Brooks, not perfectly, not studio clear, but clear enough that the courtroom did not need anyone to explain what it had seen. Kevin's face tightened. Tyler looked down at his lap. And little Lily, still pressed against her mother, whispered, he was waiting. Those words were not admitted as testimony. They did not need to be. They were the emotional truth of the room. Mark Ellison rose for cross-examination, but this time his confidence sounded forced. He asked Tyler if he disliked Kevin Brooks. No. If he had been influenced by news coverage? No. If police told him what to say? No. If he was certain the video had not been altered? Tyler looked confused. It's my phone, he said. I just recorded it. The jury understood that answer better than any technical explanation. Then Mark asked, "You cannot say where Mr. Brooks drove after leaving the parking lot, can you?" Tyler shook his head. "No, you did not witness the crash. No. You did not see any impact. No." Mark turned slightly toward the jury as if those three answers saved the defense. But Olivia stood for redirect and asked only one question. "Tyler, when you recorded the video, did you know there would later be a crash involving the Morgan family?" "No." "Then why did you say, 'Is that guy following them?'" Tyler swallowed. "Because it looked like he was. That was all. Sometimes truth is not dramatic. Sometimes it is a teenager saying exactly what everyone else can see." After Tyler stepped down, Olivia called Officer James Miller again. He testified that the route from the school parking lot to the Morgan family's home passed directly through Cedar and Westbrook, where the crash occurred. He also testified that Kevin Brooks initially told officers he had come from a hardware store across town. Olivia placed the store receipt on screen. It was dated the day before, not the day of the crash, another crack. Then came the phone records. Kevin's phone connected to a tower near the school at 8:42 p.m. The crash occurred at 8:51 p.m. 9 minutes. The jury watched the timeline build itself. School parking lot, SUV waiting, Morgan van leaving, Kevin following, crash 9 minutes later. And yet Kevin Brooks had told officers he was nowhere near the school. Mark Ellison argued the phone tower covered several blocks. He said people can drive near schools without following anyone. He said the video did not show impact. Again and again, he returned to the phrase that had started his defense. "No one saw impact, but I could feel the phrase losing power," because the courtroom was beginning to understand that impact is not the only truth that matters. A man can reveal intent before the collision. A waiting vehicle can speak. A parking pass can speak. A hair clip lodged in a grill can speak. And a child's fear can speak, even when her voice barely rises above a whisper. Then Olivia Bennett placed one final exhibit on the screen. It was a call log from Kevin Brooks' phone. At 8:37 p.m., 5 minutes before Tyler's video began, Kevin had called someone. The call lasted 43 seconds. The contact name was not saved. "Just a number," Olivia said. Investigators traced it to a prepaid phone. The same prepaid phone had called David Morgan 3 times in the week before the crash. David looked confused. Rachel looked frightened. "I asked Olivia whether they had identified the owner," she said. "Not yet, Your Honor, but we recovered a voicemail from Mr. Morgan's phone that was left from this number 2 nights before the crash." The courtroom became very still. David Morgan looked at his wife. Rachel's face had gone pale. Olivia asked permission to play the voicemail. I allowed it. A crackling sound filled the courtroom. Then a distorted male voice came through the speakers. "Pay what you owe, David, or next time your family won't make it home." Rachel began crying. David lowered his head. Kevin Brooks stared straight ahead, but I was watching Mark Ellison because in that moment, Kevin's own attorney looked surprised. And when a defense attorney is surprised by evidence against his client, the courtroom feels it instantly. Then Olivia Bennett turned toward the jury and said, "Your Honor, the state believes someone helped Mr. Brooks plan the intimidation before the crash." I looked at the call log again, the prepaid phone, the threat, the waiting SUV, the crash. And then my court officer entered quietly from the side door and handed Olivia a folded note. She read it, her face changed. She looked up at me and said, "Your Honor, we have just identified the owner of the prepaid phone." Kevin Brooks's chair scraped the floor as he shifted backward. Rachel Morgan gripped her daughter's hand. Olivia's voice lowered. "The phone was purchased by someone inside this courthouse." When Olivia Bennett said the prepaid phone had been purchased by someone inside the courthouse, I felt the entire room shift, not emotionally, structurally. There are moments in a trial when a case stops being about one defendant and begins to reveal a network around him, a hidden hand, a second voice. Someone standing close enough to the courtroom to understand how justice works and dishonest enough to try bending it before it arrives. Kevin Brooks sat perfectly still, too still. The kind of stillness a man chooses when movement might betray panic. Rachel Morgan pulled Lily closer. David Morgan looked toward the gallery as if the person who threatened his family might be sitting only a few rows behind him. And for the first time, I saw fear move through the spectators. Not curiosity, fear, because until that moment, the danger had seemed outside the courthouse. A contractor, a vehicle, a crash in the rain. But now Olivia's words had brought the threat inside the building where everyone was supposed to be safe. I asked Miss Bennett to clarify. She looked down at the folded note again. The phone was purchased using a debit card belonging to Thomas Reed. A murmur crossed the courtroom. I knew that name. Everyone who worked in that courthouse knew that name. Thomas Reed was not a lawyer. He was not a judge. He was not a police officer. He was a court services clerk, a man who processed filings, scheduled hearings, handled public records requests, and moved quietly through the building every day without attracting attention. People like Thomas Reed are often invisible until something goes wrong, and invisibility in the wrong hands can become power. I looked toward the side wall where court staff sometimes stood during hearings. Thomas Reed was not there. That told me something immediately. Olivia Bennett continued. Investigators had traced the prepaid phone purchase to a convenience store 4 blocks from the courthouse. Surveillance footage showed Thomas Reed buying it 2 nights before the crash. That same phone later called David Morgan and left the threat. Pay what you owe, David, or next time your family won't make it home. Those words returned to the room without being played again. Everyone remembered them. Some sentences do not need repetition. They stay in the air. Mark Ellison rose, but not quickly this time. His face had lost its courtroom smoothness. Your Honor, there is no evidence connecting my client to this Thomas Reed beyond speculation. I looked at Kevin Brooks. He did not look confused. That mattered. If a man hears that someone inside the courthouse may have helped threaten the family he allegedly harmed, and he truly has no connection to that person, surprise comes naturally. Kevin showed no surprise, only calculation. Olivia asked permission to introduce call logs between Kevin Brooks and Thomas Reed. Mark objected. I overruled him after reviewing the foundation. The logs appeared on the screen. 7 calls in the month before the crash, 3 calls in the week before the crash, 1 call on the night of the crash at 8:29 p.m. 8 minutes before the threatening voicemail was left. 13 minutes before Tyler Dawson recorded Kevin waiting in the school parking lot, 22 minutes before the Morgan family van was struck. The jury stared at the timeline. I have always believed timelines are among the most honest witnesses in a courtroom. People lie, memories bend, motives hide, but time, when properly documented, has a cold discipline to it. 8:29, 8:37, 8:42, 8:51, step by step. The night was rebuilding itself. Olivia then called Detective Laura Hayes. She had been assigned after the crash investigation expanded. She walked to the stand with a thick file and the calm expression of someone who had spent days following a trail no one expected to exist. She testified that Thomas Reed had accessed the Morgan family's civil filing 2 weeks before the crash. That filing contained their address, phone number, vehicle information, and details of their payment dispute with Kevin Brooks. David Morgan looked stunned. Rachel looked sick. That was when I saw it clearly. The family had thought their court documents were part of seeking help. Instead, someone had turned those documents into a map. Detective Hayes explained that Kevin Brooks had filed a small claims action against David Morgan for the unpaid construction balance. Thomas Reed processed part of that file. Shortly afterward, Kevin and Reed began communicating by phone. Olivia asked, "Did Mr. Reed have any financial connection to Mr. Brooks?" The detective nodded. "Yes, bank records show 2 electronic payments from Kevin Brooks to Thomas Reed. For what purpose?" The memo lines read, "Consulting, consulting." I have seen that word used to cover many sins. It sounds clean, professional, harmless, but in that courtroom, nobody believed Thomas Reed had been paid to consult on roofing repairs. Olivia displayed the bank transfers, $500. Then $750, both made before the crash. Mark Ellison cross-examined aggressively. He suggested Thomas Reed might have acted alone. He suggested Kevin hired him only to help with paperwork. He suggested that the phone calls were related to the small claims case. Detective Hayes answered each question carefully. Then Mark asked, "Did you find any written message where my client instructs Thomas Reed to threaten the Morgan family?" "No." "Did you find any written message where my client instructs him to buy a prepaid phone?" "No." "Did you find any written message where my client says he intends to crash into the family van?" "No." Mark turned slightly toward the jury. He thought he had regained ground, then Olivia stood for redirect. "Detective, did you find any deleted messages between Kevin Brooks and Thomas Reed?" "Yes." Mark turned back sharply. Detective Hayes explained that forensic analysis recovered fragments of deleted text from Reed's phone. The first fragment appeared on the screen. "Need them, scared before court." Rachel Morgan covered her mouth. The second fragment. Don't use your real phone. David Morgan stared at Kevin Brooks with pure disbelief. The third fragment was incomplete, but enough remained. After the program. Follow them until the rest was missing. The courtroom sat in absolute silence. Even I had to take a moment before allowing the next question, because now the pattern was no longer hidden in suspicion. It was forming in front of us. Kevin Brooks had a money dispute with the Morgan family. He made threats. He contacted a courthouse clerk who had access to their personal information. A prepaid phone was bought. A warning was left. Kevin waited outside the school program. He followed the family. The van was struck. And then he claimed a mysterious hit-and-run driver had done it. Olivia Bennett approached the evidence screen again. She said there was one more piece of recovered footage, this time from a traffic camera farther down Westbrook Avenue. It was not pointed at the intersection itself. It did not capture the crash directly, but it captured vehicles passing 30 seconds before impact. The video played. Rain streaked across the lens. Headlights moved through the dark. The Morgan family van passed first, then Kevin's SUV close behind, too close. Then, several seconds later, another vehicle passed, a white sedan. Olivia paused the frame. That sedan, she said, belongs to Thomas Reed. I looked at Kevin Brooks. This time, he looked at Thomas Reed's name on the screen the way a man looks at a rope beginning to tighten. Detective Hayes testified that Reed's sedan was found the next morning with a damaged front license plate bracket and traces of red paint. Red paint from the Morgan van. The courtroom turned cold, because now we had the answer to a question that had haunted the case from the beginning. Who hit the family van? The evidence suggested something even darker than we had imagined. Kevin Brooks may not have been the only vehicle involved. He may have trapped them from behind while Thomas Reed struck from the side, forcing the van into the pole. A coordinated intimidation, a stage crash, a family used as a warning. Rachel began to cry silently. David lowered his head. Lily clutched the stuffed rabbit so tightly I could see her knuckles whiten. And then, just as Olivia prepared to continue, the courtroom doors opened. 2 officers entered. Between them walked Thomas Reed. His hands were cuffed, his face was pale, but his eyes were not on the prosecutors, not on me, not on the jury. They were locked directly on Kevin Brooks, and Kevin, for the first time in the entire trial, looked afraid of someone other than the truth. When Thomas Reed entered my courtroom in handcuffs, the case changed for the final time. Until that moment, Kevin Brooks had been fighting the evidence, but now he was fighting the man who could explain it. Thomas Reed looked nothing like a criminal mastermind. He looked tired, pale, and smaller than I remembered him from the courthouse hallways. For years, he had moved through that building carrying files, stamping documents, answering phones, and passing quietly behind the machinery of justice. And that is what disturbed me most. Evil does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it signs forms, sometimes it wears an employee badge, sometimes it knows exactly where the records are kept. Reed's eyes stayed locked on Kevin Brooks as officers guided him forward. Kevin tried not to look back at him, but he failed. For one brief second, their eyes met. And in that second, the jury saw the truth before anyone spoke it. These were not strangers. These were not 2 men accidentally connected by phone records and bad timing. These were men tied together by fear, money, and a plan that had nearly destroyed a family. Thomas Reed was not called immediately. His attorney requested a brief conference. The prosecution confirmed he had agreed to testify under a limited cooperation agreement related to the threats, the prepaid phone, and his role in tracking the Morgan family. Kevin Brooks' attorney objected with everything he had left. But the evidence was no longer standing alone. It had become a chain: the threatening voicemail, the prepaid phone, the deleted messages, the parking lot video, the school parking pass, the hair clip, the red paint, the waiting SUV. The second vehicle, the family van, crushed against the pole. By the time Thomas Reed stand, the courtroom had become so quiet that even the air seemed careful. He raised his right hand and swore to tell the truth. His voice shook. Not because he respected the oath, because he finally feared what breaking it might cost him. Olivia Bennett asked him how he knew Kevin Brooks. Reed admitted he had processed Kevin's small claims filing against David Morgan. He admitted Kevin had complained that the Morgans were refusing to pay him. He admitted he had accessed their court documents and provided Kevin with private details that should never have left the courthouse system: their address, their phone number. their school event date, their vehicle information. Rachel Morgan closed her eyes when she heard that. David stared at the floor like a man realizing the system he trusted had been used to find his children. Then Reed admitted buying the prepaid phone. He admitted leaving the voicemail, and finally he admitted following the Morgan family after the school program. Olivia asked him the question the entire courtroom had been waiting for. Who hit the family van? Thomas Reed looked at Kevin Brooks. Kevin stared back at him with a kind of frozen hatred. Then Reed said, "We both did." The courtroom went still, not silent, still, as if every person in the room had been physically stopped by those three words. Reed explained that Kevin was supposed to scare the Morgans, not kill them. Those were his words, as if that distinction made the plan less monstrous. Kevin followed them from the school. Reed waited farther down Westbrook Avenue. The goal was to force the van off the road, frighten David into paying, and make it look like a chaotic rainy night accident. But plans built on cruelty rarely stay controlled. Kevin came too close behind the van. Reed struck from the side. Rachel lost control. The van hit the pole, and inside that van were three children. Lily Morgan began crying softly against her mother's coat. Rachel held her so tightly, I thought she might never let go. David's face hardened in a way I will never forget. Because fathers sometimes carry anger differently. They do not always explode. Sometimes they sit very still, because if they move, the grief will become something larger than the room can hold. Kevin Brooks finally stood. "He's lying," he said. But it was too late. The words were empty now. Every lie he had told had been stripped away, piece by piece, until there was nothing left for him to hide behind. The verdict came later, after all the evidence had been heard. After every instruction had been given, after the jury had done its duty, Kevin Brooks was found guilty. Thomas Reed, under his own separate agreement, would face punishment as well. But that day when Kevin stood before me for sentencing, I did not see a contractor anymore. I saw a man who had turned a payment dispute into a threat into a chase, and a chase into a violent crash involving innocent children. Before sentencing, Kevin was allowed to speak. He said he never meant for anyone to be seriously hurt. I have heard that sentence more times than I can count. Never meant, as if consequences only matter when they match intention. But the law does not work that way. Morality does not work that way. A family does not become less injured because the man who harmed them hoped the damage would be smaller. I looked at Kevin Brooks and said, "You did not lose control because of rain. You lost control because of arrogance. You believed fear could collect a debt. You believed intimidation could replace justice. You believed a family could be pressured, followed, threatened, and struck, and somehow the truth would disappear into bad weather." Kevin stared at me. I continued. But the truth did not disappear. It survived in a parking pass. It survived in paint transfer. It survived in a child's hair clip. It survived in a teenager's video. And it survived in the voice of a little girl who was brave enough to say, "That's him." As Lily was sitting against Rachel, holding that same stuffed rabbit. This time, she was not looking at the floor. That mattered to me. Justice does not erase trauma. It does not undo broken ribs, fractured wrists, nightmares, or the sound of metal folding around a child. But justice can do one sacred thing. It can tell the victim, the lie is over. I sentenced Kevin Brooks to prison for aggravated assault, conspiracy, witness intimidation, reckless endangerment, and related charges. I ordered restitution for the Morgan family's medical bills, vehicle loss, counseling, and long-term recovery. When deputies approached him, Kevin looked back at David Morgan. Maybe he expected hatred, maybe he expected fear. But David did not give him either. He simply placed one hand on Rachel's shoulder and the other on Lily's back, as if reminding himself that his family was still there, damaged, changed, but alive. And that was something Kevin Brooks had tried to take from them. After the courtroom emptied, I stayed seated for a while. Judges do that sometimes, not because the case is unfinished, but because something inside us needs time to put the human pieces back where the legal file cannot. I thought about the question that brought everyone into my courtroom. Who hit the family van? The answer in the end was not only Kevin Brooks. It was greed. It was intimidation. It was a courthouse clerk who sold trust for money. It was a man who believed a family's fear was cheaper than a fair legal fight. It was every small lie that came before the crash. That is what I want you to understand. A violent act rarely begins at the moment of impact. It begins earlier, with a threat nobody reports, with a file accessed by the wrong hands, with a phone call made in secret. With someone deciding that another person's safety is less important than their own pride, the Morgan family came into my courtroom asking who hit their van. They left knowing the truth, and sometimes truth is painful. But truth also gives people back the one thing fear tries hardest to steal. Their voice, Lily Morgan, had entered my courtroom silent, clutching a stuffed rabbit and staring at the floor. She left holding her mother's hand, still afraid, still healing, but no longer carrying the burden of a secret adults tried to bury. And I will remember that child longer than I remember the damaged vehicles, the phone records, or the verdict, because in the end, this case reminded me that justice is not only about finding who caused the crash, it is about refusing to let the powerful rewrite the screams of a family into the silence of an accident. The family van was hit by two men. But the truth was carried by a child, and when that truth finally reached my courtroom, no amount of rain, money, lies, or fear could wash it away.